Thank you so much for coming today. So, today is actually about you and your vision. I know that this thing said storytelling, but we're going to tackle this thing from a different direction today. So, this is really about you. But like always in these things, before we talk about you, I have to talk about me. So, let's talk about me for a second. And also, we have people online. And this fancy thing is supposed to move with me, and maybe you see the screen. But for the people online, if you can't see the screen, which I think you can, I will also read something out loud if there's a need. So let's start. My name is Lazar. I know some of you more than others. And actually, in the past 20 years, I've worked primarily as a filmmaker, as a cinematographer, and then later as a producer and director. Worked in movies in the United States, in Israel, and in Vietnam, of all places, mainly because of my thesis director at AFI, where I went to school. And we have here another educator also from AFI and good friend. So filmmaking has been a big part of things that I've done. But at the same time, parallel to that, I've also worked as an educator at the American Film Institute in Los Angeles, at Columbia University, here in New York. Nowadays, I do workshop for Sundance Institute and the City College of New York, but there's many other institutions I've been part of. So you can see I've been in the education sphere for a while. And if this is not enough, then I've also started some organizations, an edtech startup, and some media companies. And today I kind of bring all of this together. For a while after I stopped actively making movies, I've had real trouble saying what it is exactly that I do. And maybe some of you have kind of the same problem, because we do so many things, so it's hard to put it in one box. But if I'm pressed, then I say something like, I used to be a movie director, and now I'm a vision director. What's a vision director? Something that I made up, but today we'll talk about vision, and you'll see how practical it is, how big of a part it is in anything that you do already. And when thinking about vision, in my mind, I split how practical vision can be into two, let's say, categories. One is how we express vision directly. So, when you're pitching, when you're giving media interviews, posting on social media and all that stuff, all that is very much related to your vision, which right now maybe is a little bit more abstract, but we'll bring it down to the ground. And then there's the other way to express vision, which is through other people. So that's your marketing person that you hire, or the sales department, and the support team, and so on and so on. And that presents a whole different challenge of how to have other people represent you in a way that is faithful to that vision of yours. So these are the two, let's say, main things that in my mind are expression of vision in the many different subcategories here. And I work with founders and executives in making this happen. And I call it cinematic impact because I come from the world of movies and I use, let's call it movie making wisdom, because there's a lot of overlap between this expression of vision between movie directors and what we do in the world of business or the world of startup or anything that we do with our companies and self-employed and so on. So today had storytelling kind of on the title, and it's a little bit misleading because storytelling, in my mind, is less important than vision telling. And sometimes it's a little bit controversial, but I'm hoping that I will actually be able to prove it to you, that vision is more important than story, okay? We'll talk about movies, we'll talk about many examples of how that actually expresses itself. But let's start with taking a step back to movies, and let me present to you this guy, William Fraker, who has worked on some cinematic masterpieces, such as Father of the Bride Part 2, and some other movies too. So, out the door. So, a few years ago, I watched a documentary with an interview with William Fraker, and he was talking about something that happened on the set of Rosemary's Baby. I don't know if you've seen Rosemary's Baby. It's a great, scary movie. Very scary. And he tells it like this. There was a scene, some of you have seen it, so I'll just remind you, basically, Rosemary's pregnant, she's not feeling well, and the neighbors come over, and the neighbor sees that she's not feeling well and decides to help her and call a friend, a doctor, And she goes to the landline. Remember those? That's in the bedroom. And Rosemary's in the hallway. And the director tells the cinematographer, frame the shot from Rosemary's perspective. So we see the other person in the bedroom. Well, something like this, right? Frames up the shot the way that we would imagine it. But then the director comes and says, no, not like that. Move the camera to the side so that we can't see her face. So the cinematographer thinks, what's that about? Does that, and they shoot it, and this is the shot. And, it bugged him. He says in that interview, it bugged him, what's the deal with this? And then came the premiere, and he says in this interview that when the shot came up, he looked around to see how people react, how the audience reacts to this. And he noticed that people kind of tilt their head a little bit, as if they're trying to see around the corner. And then he got it. So to me, that's cinematic impact. Now think about it for a moment. That very physical effect, literally moving people, right? That very physical effect. And what if we could have that effect on our audience? Such a visceral way. If I had to define cinematic impact, it would be this: an inferred emotional message. It's never on the surface. It's always hidden. Delivered coherently across mediums, because in movies you have acting, cinematography, set design, music, and so on, so different mediums. Resonating with an audience. So we're not talking with one person, we're talking with many people. And somehow, when you sit in the movie theater with, 200 other people, everybody understands the same thing, even though it's usually not expressed so literally. How can that be? So all these different things connect to what we do also. Think of the movie director, who will never know as much about cameras as the cinematographer, who will never know about music as the composer, and so on and so on. Not only that the movie director can make these professionals do what they need them to do, but somehow at the end it converges together into this one magical thing that affects us so much. So how can they do that without knowing so much really about any of these fields? And that's exactly what we need to do with, web developers and marketing people and salespeople and so on and so on. We don't know about the domain of these professionals, but somehow we need to lead them in a way that represents the vision, the intention, and also a way that converges. And we'll look at some examples of companies that, when that converges, it works really, really, really well. So how do we get that? But just think of the most impactful movie moments that remind us, these great moments. How do they do that? That it's almost magic when you think about the visual effects that happens in post-production and the lighting. It's like tens of people. When you look at the credits of the movies, hundreds of people. Yes, some of them do small technical things, but ultimately there's a hierarchy, and somehow it trickles down in this hierarchy in a way that is very, very coherent. How does it happen? We'll figure that out today. So I'll start with a little exercise. This is a photograph by Irving Penn of Miles Davis. And what I'm going to ask you is to describe what's happening here with Miles Davis with one word. And I should say to the people online that you can do that in the chat and we'll hear feedback from you. One word, what's going on here with Miles Davis? Love, focus, reverence. Anything else? Sir? Peace. Yeah, love. Anything from our online friends? They're shocked. They're still like, what? Is this the right place? Okay, so funny thing. I use these images and I use these exercises with many people. And here's what happens. When I ask, tell me what's going on here with Miles Davis, that's it, without the one word thing. Then people say, well, Miles Davis is holding a trumpet, Miles Davis, eyes closed. But when I ask for the one word thing, then immediately you drive to a certain core. And I think you'll agree with me that a portrait is not just a document of, well, there was this person, Miles Davis, and he was there in that specific instance. It actually is what you said that is captured here. So this is that inferred message that I was talking about. And look how easy it was for you. I got to remember that because we're going to get back to it. How easy it was to go through all of the noise. The noise is the things we recognize. that normally we would stay at the surface level. How easy it was for you to go directly into the subtext of it. You will need to do that again today. This inferred message is not unique only to brilliant photography. It happens in ads too. One word that's not Yeti, that is here. What is the word? Outdoor. Adventure. The word adventure always comes up. I can't even count how many times. Remember, we're talking to an audience. So how can it be that already in hundreds of people by now, there's always somebody that says adventure, more than one person. So some glue is happening here that is recurring again and again. One time coincidence, two time big coincidence. After 10 times, something else is going on here, right? So companies, what do they actually sell us with these ads? They sell emotions, not products. Think of Nike. There's many shoe companies, but what makes Nike Nike? Right? What is it that is being delivered with these iconic ads? So what we're talking about here, and this visual may look familiar, iceberg theory from Hemingway. What we're talking about is this big thing that is underground, the subtext, and how we usually stay on the surface. When we describe things, when we create things, when we talk with each other, when we pitch, when we have websites, whatnot, we always talk about the surface, when actually, when you look at the brilliant messages out there, the things that really work, that really resonate, there's a lot of stuff underneath, and somehow magically everybody gets it. So that is the parallel between movies and what we need to do. Okay, by the way, I should say that hopefully there'll be time for questions at the end. I don't want to keep you too late here today. End of the week, late in the day, hot outside. But there'll be time for questions also. Okay, so far we're talking about the fact that there's some hidden message embedded underground that somehow people understand. But I want to remind you that this happens magically across different mediums. So if you've ever been to an Apple store, you know that the store, the product, the website, even the shopping bag, they're all somehow connected. And if I asked you to do this one-word exercise with each one of these things, then maybe you won't say the same word, but you would eventually say words that are related to each other. That is the sort of unity that we're aspiring to, that certain companies get to do so well, that we want to do that at that level. I don't think that the difficulty is technical. We'll get back to that today. It's not about the design of it. It's not about the fancy logo or the right colors. It's about leadership. It's about something that you're able to activate and get trickle throughout the organization so that people represent you the right way. And hopefully today I'll give you some techniques in how to do that. So what we're talking about here is something really big and powerful, and we're drawing it from around, right? The contour line of it. And it's more important than story. And I promised I'll prove that to you, so I'm going to try to do that now. Let's come up with the most boring scene that we can think. Somebody getting up in the morning, brushing their teeth, getting dressed, having coffee. Let's say it takes half an hour. If we would make this movie, maybe nobody would want to watch it. But if Spielberg made the movie, could he make it interesting? Most likely, right? And if Tarantino took the same script, would it be the same movie that Tarantino? Right? No. So there's something that is applied to story, that is connected to story, that is not story, that can make or break it and change it entirely. So what is it? And here is where I kind of like to push back a little bit with all the usual storytelling workshops that we have, because they give us formulas. And the formulas, by definition, cannot be effective. If they were effective, every movie would be a blockbuster, and every pitch would raise $1 million, and so on and so on. But that's not the case. So what is that secret ingredient? Maybe it's not in story at all. So some examples, right? Duolingo. The magic is not in the color or the mascot or the copy or the logo. Product design. The funny social media presence. messaging, let's say that probably somebody else is writing the CEO's posts, but it's representative of internal communication. Shareholders letter, it's everywhere. Not only Duolingo, Bumble, at least in the beginning, was very vision driven. This great ad. It's not the brilliant copy. When you work with ad agencies and creatives, they need something from you in order to come up with stuff like this. What is that something that they need in order to keep it on track? That it's not only great as an ad, but also actually represents you. All about sustainability. The founder, very big in environmental, all that stuff. Okay, so sometimes this gets pushed into brand identity and branding, but I would argue it's bigger than that. Think about it. We all spend most of our waking time at work. That's just the reality. So it's no surprise that people look for a certain sense of purpose from work. So if you're able to align values with the people who work with you, then maybe they won't, leave when somebody offers them a higher salary. Now think of a normal organization, a corporate setting or something like that. Imagine a pyramid. So obviously the people at the top, hopefully, if it works well, they are aligned with the vision. And the more you go down that pyramid, the more people are not aligned with it. But who's customer facing? Who's representing that vision actually in the world? And when we talk about customers, that's us. I think that everybody in this room would probably even pay a little bit more to buy from companies who are aligned with our vision, who are aligned with our values, and that we kind of avoid companies that we know are not. So it's bigger than branding. It's something that really goes everywhere, that vision, this elusive thing. So how do you find it? Where is this thing? And I want to be very clear, I'm not talking about a vision statement here. A vision statement, what we're taught in like business school or whatnot, is a representation of your vision, right? But it's not the vision itself. The vision itself is something else. It's coming from you. So the answer to how to get vision is going to get us to storytelling. And I'm going to do a little exercise here with you. I'll let you read this in a moment. This is an exercise that I do with filmmakers. So my question to you, please read it. And what is the most important moment here? And for the people in the back or online, I will also read it out loud. So this is a script. Exterior riverbank day. A scorpion and a frog meet by a stream. The scorpion asks the frog to carry him across on its back. The frog says, "How do I know you won't sting me?" The scorpion replies, "Because if I do, I will die too." The frog agrees, and they begin the crossing. Halfway across, the scorpion stings the frog. The frog feels the pain and starts to sink, but has enough time to gasp, "Why?" The scorpion answers simply, "It's my nature." What's the most important moment here? What do you think? And online people, you're, of course, welcome to write in the chat. No wrong answer. Give it a try. Yeah, where is like it's really the peak of it? The end? Okay. Yeah. Asking why? Okay. One more. If if I agree, then I'll die too. Anything online? Nothing? They're still shocked. Yeah.
Oh, what was probably going through the frog's mind when he was feeling the pain?
Okay, good. So first of all, you can see there's a lot of different interpretations here. There's no wrong. When I give this little exercise to filmmakers, I tell them that this is the most important thing in the entire semester. I tell them, if you remember one thing out of this entire thing, 14 classes, whatnot, let it be this moment. Because, and I give them a little bit more work than I gave you. I tell them, write a list of all the events that happen. It was an event, anything that happens, right? So what I get when people do this is, okay, they meet, and he asks him, and then they cross, and they sting, and all that stuff. Now think like a cinematographer for a second. Let's say that we had to shoot this as a movie, and every shot costs $1 million, so we have to get very, very efficient. How would we be able to show that they meet, they talk, cross, sting, all that stuff in the most efficient, non-poetic way? A wide shot. Put them in the square. You see it. However, there is one important thing that wide shot and every event that I just said, that it's not there. The frog hesitates. Where's that hesitation? It happens before the how do I know you won't sting me? There's some thinking happening there, and then there's the question. It's not in the script, which is normal. Screenwriters actually don't write directing instruction or camera instruction. It's not here. But everybody got it. That's the idea. Right? If I ask you who the main character is, you wouldn't think it's the scorpion, you would say it's the frog. You get that too. There's things that are hinted here. And that's the technique of screenwriters. They nudge you without being explicit about this. However, recognizing that a moment of hesitation exists is super important for filmmakers, because that's what all of the close-ups and camera movement and lighting and all this stuff is about. Information, to see the meat and to see this thing happen, you don't need to go to AFI or Columbia for that, so wide shot is enough. But to express the subtext, the things that are hidden, now we're in uncharted territory, and there's a million ways to do that, right? So there's hesitation, there's understanding, did he learn? All those questions. So all this is a product of interpretation. One person would not interpret it the same way, much like I asked you for the most important moment, and we got different answers. So this gets us to the three different layers of storytelling. One is plot. Plot is all the stuff that's happening on the surface. That's what we read, right? That's the simple stuff. We're not going to argue about the plot because it's written. Then, by the way, plot is interchangeable. What do I mean by interchangeable? The same story could be about a cat and a mouse crossing the road, right? The same story could be about a driver wondering if they should take a hitchhiker who's wearing an orange jumpsuit outside of a prison. Same story, right? It's going to be okay. Take me on a ride. It's fine. So plot is not what this is really about. Then we got story. Storytelling workshops tell us that conflict is the most important part of story. And I'm also pushing back here. If that's the case, if we have a conflict and a story, but we end up exactly the same place what we started, then that's a pretty frustrating story. And you probably wouldn't like it if it's 2 hours long. Something has to change. Something has to change. So the internal transformation of a character is actually what the story is about. What changed with the frog? Did the frog learn? This is really what this thing is about, because different interpretations would have a completely different effect. Let's say that this is a stupid frog, didn't hesitate for a second, reckless. That kind of defeats the whole purpose. If the frog hesitates, the more actually the frog hesitates, the more tragic the entire thing is. Should have known. So that is all a product of interpretation. Even the character is the product of interpretation. Can I make the scorpion and the frog about the scorpion? Addicted to violence, wanting to change, believing that he can, failing at the end. Same action, same dialogue, different shots, right? We can do that. Interpretation. And then there's an even deeper level, which is the theme. So that is the message, right? What is the meaning of it? And if I asked you that, I'm sure we would get different interpretation of the meaning, what the scorpion and the frog is really about, right? So there's these three different levels. This is my, let's say, interpretation of the scorpion and the frog. Again, I don't think that we would argue about the plot. It's very simple. That's just what we read. But the other stuff, you maybe will disagree with me, and that's okay, because you're not me. You shouldn't actually just agree with me, with my interpretation. And that's why Tarantino and Spielberg wouldn't make the same movie from the Scorpion and Frog, and so on and so on and so on. So we have the three levels of storytelling. How does that apply to us? I'm going to take this and change the wording into something that is applicable to our communication. We have resonance communication, which is story-driven. What do people feel from what it is that we're delivering? We have reference messaging. What do people know about what we're saying? And we have reflection, which is what they consider. What do you actually take away from this interaction? And like a good movie, every good communication has all three. Now, something that happens with filmmakers, and I think it happens with us too, is that this becomes the main thing. So I think it comes from the fact that we are so afraid from being misunderstood or not understood at all. So we want to be very, very clear. Filmmakers really at the top film schools, master's level, make movies pursuing this goal of being clear about the information. And at best, you will get movies that people understand, but maybe nobody feels anything. So I tell my students, make movies that confuse everybody, but that everybody feels. And then, of course, you discover that audiences are smart. It's actually difficult to make movies where you understand nothing, but it's very difficult to deliver emotion intentionally in the way that the 200 people in the movie theater all feel the same thing, that they ask themselves the same question. That's the trick. Take that to what we do. Think of, I don't know, pitches, right? How much we lead with data and information and explanation, and so on and so on. There's a great study of something called narrative transportation, which is what we filmmakers call suspension of disbelief. So narrative transportation is when you read a book or watch a movie and forget where you are, or somebody calls your name and you can't hear. It's that state. And there's a paragraph in that research that jumped out to me that says they're comparing between rhetorical convincing or basically somebody explaining something to you and trying logic. I'm going to convince you of something with logic versus doing that with a story and driving to narrative transportation. If I try to convince you of something, then you will look at my credentials. Who am I to explain this to you? And what are my motives? Maybe I'm trying to sell you something. That's why when you walk in the street and somebody says, especially in New York, somebody says, hey, can I ask you a question? You probably run away, right? So, okay, but with narrative transportation, that's what the study says, bigger effect without doubting the speaker. The reason this jumped out to me is less even because of what we do here. It's just we're also on the receiving end of all of this. We are the audience. How powerful those techniques are. That it's so sneaky. Emotion is very, very powerful. Our decisions every day are not really logic driven. They're emotion driven. And think of how we communicate and how we present ourselves and how we sell and how we pitch. Does that align with it? Or are we driving with information? Usually there's a misalignment. Okay, so now comes the part that I apologize to you in advance, because when I do these workshops, beforehand, I sneakily visit everybody's website and I take examples. So yeah, so don't worry. The idea is not, and yeah, that's also you online, by the way. The idea is not to put anybody on the spot, but to start practicing what we did with Irving Penn, Miles Davis, on our own stuff, right? To be able to apply this thing. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so this is great. If you had to do this one word exercise here, what would it be? Fun. Interesting. I look at this, and of course, the word that jumps is passion, but that's what gets interesting, that when I talk with filmmakers, we have to disconnect from the stuff that's recognizable, like look beyond text. For filmmakers, and if you're into visual communication and whatnot, this is where abstract art actually comes in very useful. Ironically, you wouldn't think. But abstract art is the same thing, just without the recognizable form. If you're able to look at the Jackson Pollock or something like that and articulate what you feel, and also articulate why, because now you're not hanging on to recognizable forms and all that stuff, then you maybe will allow you to graduate into, things that we recognize. That's where we start, in the mess. So in this work or any other work, we have to look past the text and see what is the word that we recognize, the feeling, and our reference point, what we aspire to, is very high. That's the Miles Davis standard. Do you feel it the same way that you felt it there? Now, I want to preface here and say, not always the goal is to feel something. Maybe the intention is information, and that's completely fine. But we need to start getting used to recognizing these things. and looking at something and aligning it with the intention. This, by the way, is where constructive criticism, at least for visual arts and filmmaking, comes in. Because you can look at something and say, yeah, I don't like it. But that's not very useful. We're not dealing with one person's taste. We're dealing with an audience and communication. So how do you get that information? If I say something like, well, what I'm getting from it is X, and the reason I'm getting that is Y, and we ask enough people, there's no emotion really involved in it. Whether I liked it or disliked it is besides the point. I'm not insulting anybody. But you, let's say as the person who created this thing, get actual feedback information. So this is actually from a quote from Irving Penn, to use the word effective instead of like. What is effective here? Once something needs to be effective, you are kind of trapped in this thinking, because if something is effective, then what is the goal? What is the purpose? Here's another example. When I look at websites, I kind of dig into the about page to try and see evidence of vision. Usually it's some emotional related thing. I look at mission statements, vision statements, and so on. So here, I took that from another page, connection and cultural identity. How great is that? This is a great idea. Maybe I'm not the target audience here, but if you are, then you can ask yourself, do you feel this? Do you feel it? And again, what's the reference? The Miles Davis photo, right? We're putting it up there. Do you feel it? If yes, why? If no, why? Right? And repeat and repeat and repeat. Looking and comparing to intention is the most difficult thing to do, also for filmmakers. Think about it. I say that to cinematographers. The most difficult thing to do is to be on set and look, be present and look. Why? It's the same thing for us. We're being pulled into all different directions all day long, putting out fires. Something didn't happen right. Somebody was late. Some equipment didn't get, and so on, and so on. All day long, you're chasing something. And the last thing that you do is actually your job. And your job is to know the intention. That's difficult for itself. To be honest with yourself and what that intention is, and to know the 3 levels of that. That's what you're trying to communicate. And then to be present and look, not look at your intention. That's the thing that's obscuring us, but to look at actually what's in front of you, let's say, and ask yourself, is that delivering that intention? If you can't, use other people. Use people who have no idea what you're trying to do, who don't know you, and get their feedback. Ask as many people as possible, because our goal is to talk about it, to deliver it to an audience. That's what we do as filmmakers too. Now, sometimes I get the question, what if the word that I'm coming up when I'm looking at this is not an emotional word? Or what if I can't come up with a word at all? Don't force it. Your difficulty in articulating it is indicative, right? If you come up with a non-emotion word, then okay, is it about reference communication? In other words, it has to come naturally and quickly. Don't try too hard. And if it doesn't work, then the fact that it doesn't work. So I encourage filmmakers, when I ask, what's the story? Say you don't know the story. If you're looking at something and you don't know, say you don't know, because that is a big indication. By the way, what's the vision? Vision is something that we go around all the time, maybe as leaders. But I know that there's some hesitation when it's like, do I know my vision? Do I know what vision is? Know that the word, this is ironic, the word that the film students at the top film schools are the most afraid of is story. You would think that they know what story is and what their story is, right? But if I point at a Columbia student or AFI, whatnot, master level, second year, whatnot, what's your story? They're like, because they know, they're smart enough to know that I'm not talking about the plot. So it all points to preparation. That's the ironic thing. It's free. It doesn't cost money to sit down and think, what is the emotion and what I want to transform emotionally and all that stuff. But for some reason, it's a type of effort that, people don't do. Okay, I'm showing you websites all the time. Sorry, Tim. But it really is everywhere, right? It's everywhere. So video happens to be something that is maybe a little bit more easy for me. But the difference with video and let's say a website or a static image, that video has a timeline, right? So what do you start with, right? What do you end with are questions that are relevant for video. And that's where things like hook come up. And we know hook is from social media now. Everybody knows that. What's a hook? An emotional hook. Rage bait, rage is all emotion. It doesn't have to be rage. Really, it's about starting with emotion. So something that we do many times is we start with ourselves. How did I start today? Try to make you laugh, partial success, and told you that it's about you, right? So maybe postpone the me for a moment and make it about them because you need them. You need to earn, and some people earn already. Like, for example, when you go to a Christopher Nolan movie, Christopher Nolan doesn't need to prove anything to you. You're going to sit there, right? You bought the ticket. But many of us still need to earn that trust. Need to earn the trust of the person who already showed up there, pressed play or visited the website. Now you need to make them stay. So what do you start with? And what I bring in, I suggest that you look at the emotion. Not necessarily only rage. There's some great examples. Sort of social media, so I'm assuming maybe it's Luminary members. Great examples of leading with emotion that is not rage, right? Doesn't have to be a bad thing. Whatever the form of it is, it applies to anything and everything, every way that we express ourselves. Think of onboarding material that is emotion-driven and not information. I'm not saying that we don't need the information. Of course, the information is part of it, but the information should come secondary. It's supporting that and not the other way around. We have to grab people's attention. We have to make them stay. We have to be effective. I don't want to show you a 15-minute video that you are obligated because of some certification to watch and sit there, and to force you to watch it because the program knows when you switch to another, you switch to another tab on the browser, right? That's sort of the lowest form of attention. You have to watch this, right? Can I make you actually want to watch this? I would argue yes. So it really angers me sometimes when there's things that are important. Like at higher education, there's all the anti-sexual harassment and all that stuff. Like, really, you can't make this interesting and important and to align me with this mission? It's not possible. Why is it all like legal driven? Like to put a check in the box. These kind of things, I understand that it's resources and money or whatnot, but so much money is being poured into this. So it's really every way that we express ourselves. If I had to define vision, I would define it like this: the ability to see something that doesn't exist yet. All of you have that already. Lead others in making it real, lifelong learning of that. We're learning it and we'll continue learning it forever. And keep every detail true to a coherent whole. That's to aspire to. That's the Duolingo and Apple and whatnot. Remind you, it's not resources. It's not the thing that costs money. Why is it? And I know I always sound like a broken record when I talk with students. Figuring out what the story is doesn't cost you money. It costs you time. So why? So the same thing here. But to me, vision is actually something much more personal. It's your unique identity, who you are. You interpreted the scorpion and the frog different than one another. The way you tell your story and the way you see the future. In vision statements, when you do an MBA or whatnot, vision, yes, is always the future and mission is the present, right? So that's the way that they split it. But I think that it actually puts the weight on the wrong thing. It's not just the future. It's the future the way you see it. So this is why the formulas that were being given by storytelling workshops, by definition, they cannot be as effective because these workshops ignore the single most important thing, the storyteller. Storyteller is going to do it differently. You and you and you and you will tell the same story differently. So what we need to work on is not a formula. It's about what is it in us that we apply in order to tell that story differently. For filmmakers, that process is called breaking down the script. So a director gets a screenplay. Let's take the simple situation where there's a screenwriter and a director, because when the director is also the screenwriter, it's significantly more difficult and complex. So let's keep it simple. First thing that they do, they read the script and they look for their interpretation. How do I do that? Who is the main character? What is the moment? What is the emotion? What changes? And they do that for every scene. Cinematographer breaks down the script too. Some technical reason. What's the most difficult thing technically? Is there any, I don't know, underwater stuff, flying things, I need to get equipment. Actors break down the script for beats. But all the people who are not the director, what they need is not just a script. They need guidance. Otherwise, the maybe most common criticism that educators give filmmakers, young filmmakers, is, let's say for cinematography, the director and the cinematographer didn't make the same movie. What does that mean? It means that there were two visions and they're not aligned. That's the director's job. So when the website and the pitch and all that does not align, it's the director, right? It's not the graphic designer or the marketing person and so on and so on. It's us. It's the ability that we need to develop. So how do we do that? Let's make it practical. I'm going to use the same technique that I use with filmmakers. I call it the story prism. So far, we kind of back-engineered vision and story. We took something that exists, an image, a website, Tim's video, and we back-engineered it. Now we're going the other way around, which is the way that we actually are supposed to do it, build it from the ground up. So we start with a character. Character, not a trivial thing. Who is the character? One, it's not you. You're the storyteller. So if I ask, who's the character? Maybe the answer would be, well, is it the client? Is it the person I'm selling to? And so on. The idea with character, especially when you're speaking to an audience, is to create identification and alignment. So for now, I'm going to keep it very, very simple and say that your audience is the character. Who you're speaking with is the character. Keep it simple. There's going to be super easy alignment because it's literally them. Then I'm going to write the plot. What's the plot? The plot is the simplest way to describe what it is that you're doing. Let's say that I'm selling shoes. The plot will be a person is buying shoes. Right? There's no emotion, nothing about it. This is what is happening. If you're selling a service, if you're speaking for an internal team, onboarding, I don't know, whatever it is, that's just the easiest way to describe it. And then I'm doing something that is a little bit more complex. I'm going to start writing the transformation. So I'm going to start writing the before here and the after there. So if I'm selling shoes, I don't know, let's say that a person is barefoot, right? Here, and then they have shoes here. I'm going to start with really the most basic stuff, but then I'm going to start building on top of that until I get to the deepest. Building on top to get to the deepest, maybe it doesn't make sense, but you get what I'm saying. To get to the deepest level, what is this shoe? What does it really represent? What am I trying to change in the world with this product? Because there's a million shoe companies, but only one Nike. So what is that thing? And when I get to the deepest level that I think that really is me, and again, this is already interpretation, because if you do this and I do this, we'll do different things. I take the deepest thing and I articulate it as my story. Okay, here's an example. Person buys a jacket, selling jackets, right? Jackets, one of the functions is to be warm. So going from cold to warm, but that is pretty much every jacket company, right? So that's not making me unique. So I'm starting to think, what is that jacket? And I'm coming up with a bunch of stuff. But eventually I get to this idea that I want to bring a sense of adventure. That's actually what I do. This kind of going from boring to explorer and interesting and adventure, that's what this is all about. And I write it as a story. I mean more poetic about it. I change the person into an explorer. Every person I'm speaking with is an explorer. So now look at these ads by the North Face. The environment is this monotony, right? And the color, in this case, is the adventure. Now, the funny thing about this is that you don't need to be a photographer and you don't need to be an expert in color to understand this, right? You are an expert in the most important thing, which is the emotion. So all you need to do is know what the intention is and then hire the best person that you can and lead them with the feeling that you're going for. I've had directors take me to concerts or take me to some cliff overseeing Los Angeles and tell me, this is the feeling that I want. I don't know how to say it in words. That's fine. Great. Right? Put me in that situation. I'm the collaborator. So do that, whatever, however form. It doesn't matter. You need to lead not with knowledge and expertise. I fell into that trap. And I know how to build websites and I know I gain all this knowledge. It's in a way useless because you can't micromanage everything. You have to lead people. So the technical ability, it's not about that at all. You have to know what you want and then you have to be present and look at it. And you say, look, I'm looking for a sense of adventure, let's say, and I'm not feeling it here. It's the job of the photographer or the designer, or whoever, to work with you, to collaborate, and to extract from you somehow. That's the job of the cinematographer. To somehow get from you what you're trying to achieve and then change what's needed in order for it to work for you. And over time, lo and behold, you'll understand more about photography and graphic design and so on and so on. Exactly the same thing happens with directors too. But in the beginning, first movie, that's not the ability that makes or break their success as a director. And that shouldn't be the ability that makes or break your success as a CEO or as a leader. So the big question is what really you want to change. And we'll get to questions in a moment. We'll have enough time. What do you want to change? Coming from filmmaking, I like to look at it like this. Imagine your character. Again, that's your audience. How do they feel before they ever met you, before whatever it is that you do has been done? And how do they feel after? Now, this before has to be based on reality, not your assumption. So the fact that I said that my client lives in a monotonous world, that's all fine, but maybe they don't. So this is where we have to try. We have to test and see if it resonates. This before is grounded in reality, and this is the dream. And hopefully, if you are able to resonate emotionally with your audience, you let them imagine the after, and then you sell your service or your pitch or whatever it is that you want. Once you find your vision, which through the vision you arrive at your story, embed it in everything, because that's your North Star. Every time you open your mouth, every time you create something is an opportunity to express that vision. Don't let a single opportunity escape. That's why I tell people, don't just be a storyteller, be a vision teller. So if you want, I have sort of like a handout that will help you in doing these two things that we did today. One is to back engineer, right? To look at something that exists, the one word thing and so on, and see what is being communicated. And then I always recommend do it with a lot of people, right? Do it with 10 people. You get all these words and you start noticing patterns. And also build it. So this story prism and everything. So I have that, and I invite you to reach out to me and I'll send it to you. And of course, reach out to me with any other question or anything, or I'm usually sitting up here, so feel free to step up and, I'd love to have a conversation with you. And if you are into filmmaking in any way, then there's a book that's coming out. Now it's the shameless promotion. There is a book coming out at the beginning of 2026, and there's a podcast that's already up. And this is sort of like the course, the filmmaking course, visual communication. After 15 years of doing this, I'm putting it out in the world. Okay, so we have about 7 minutes before they shut us down. And yeah, any question? I don't know if that's what you expected from today, whatnot. Yeah.
So when we're putting together origin story, why I do what I do you have any specific advice in addition to what you covered today in regard?
Well, I think that imagining the before and after is always a good approach for me. So one thing, for filmmakers, the idea of thinking about the audience sometimes is like it feels dirty or something. Like you want to think that what we do is pure expression, but it is in a commercial setting. Like there's a buyer. So all the why and everything, you have to maybe consider the fact that there is a recipient on the other side, and how is that related to why it is what you're doing? And in that relationship with the world, maybe the view will change. That's why I am recommending thinking about it before and after, thinking about the person you interact with and their current emotional state, relevant, of course, to what it is that we're talking about, and then researching, actually seeing, like, for example, what I like to do is going to social media forums in the relevant field, because I work with executives and founders, so if it's whatever field it is, and see what the top performing posts are. Lo and behold, it's always emotional, always somebody's frustrated with something, always somebody's, saying that this is wrong and you're doing this and why and blah, 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 all that stuff. Fine, but it's emotional. So a pain point that is not imagined, but a real pain point that is painful, is a good before. And then now is your why, right? What do I do about it? What does it mean to me that people experience this pain? And that's where the message comes through. I remove inhibitions to communication so that people can resonate with an audience. Inhibition to communication, before and after. And that may be, if you do it in a concise way, can become the vision statement, but statements aside, you see how it really trickles into everything that we do. Hope it helped. Any other question? Yeah.
Yes. In the examples that you showed earlier, you showed the one for kids learning center.
Yeah.
Fun. And you said, well, the word is passion. Like, were you saying that is a good or bad example?
First of all, I won't answer that. But I will say that many times when we see the passion word, I didn't think necessarily that the word should be passion or not, but it was a word that was highlighted. So then it makes you think, is that what is supposed to be communicated? But ultimately, it doesn't really matter. I picked that because it winks at you, that word passion. So maybe you want to say, well, obviously, the word passion. But really, the difficulty is understanding that when you look at something, images or any form of communication, the answer of what is being communicated is not in the image. It's in you. It's weird. That's how the book starts. We are looking at images, but to understand them, we need to look at ourselves. And that's where the expertise come in. Who am I to talk about financial advising or sustainability or so on? So fields I know nothing about, and I work with my clients. Who am I? Well, I'm actually talking about emotion and communication. The plot doesn't matter. So if you're able to tune into that, you'll know if the fact that the word passion is highlighted or not is significant. Does it work? Why is it highlighted? It's highlighted to grab our attention, and so on and so on. So these are technical things that are done, but are they effective in delivering an effect that is desired? Well, we'll know if we ask ourselves, what do I feel? Where does my eye go to here? It's all in us.
Not the source, or what is the whole reason for doing that?
Well, we don't know.
Well, assuming we had that person right here who created that website, we would ask them the question, is that what you wanted, that emotion that you wanted to?
Well, that's a good question. Did you ever get to ask Spielberg what he intended? No, right? So in a way, their intention matters and doesn't matter. Because when people sit there, they get what they get. That's why we, as the people who make these websites or they're ours, we need to be very honest with ourselves. And we, as people who are helping them, need to just be honest. Say, look, this is what I'm getting from it. Take it or leave it. And this is what I'm getting. Now you can decide to ignore it or not. If 10 people say that, what does that mean? But knowing the intention shouldn't change my interpretation of it as an audience member. That's why when we bring up filmmakers, put them in the hot seat, the first thing we tell them is, don't speak. Listen. Maybe at the end, if there's time, say something. But the thing is that what they say is like, well, on the day it was raining and then the actor was late. We love everybody, but honestly, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We got what we got. Yeah.
Does your vision always have to be distilled down to a single word? I know we talked about the Irving Penn photo. You kind of asked us to like cut through. Thinking in my own context of my business, I run an event design company. And the way that I explain this to people in the best way is that it's a types of events that I like to create are picture a dinner party, stand at the night, candles have burned down, the food's been eaten, the wine's been drunk. Everyone's a little easy, you're having good conversations. That's how I want to make you. And that's a really nice story thing to make that happen. Is there a more effective way to communicate that, or
It really depends on your audience, but I will say that the one word thing was not really about the vision. It was more about the inferred emotion, because that was back engineering. Our job is to decide in every communication what it is what's the emotion that we want to convey. So what you just said, that mini image, mental image, is a communication that is intended to deliver an emotion. How would you do that in an image? How would you do the same thing that you just did in a website? How would you do that? And so on and so on, a pitch. So there is an equivalent. You just said a series of words, but there's many other mediums that you need to operate in, because we're in the world and marketing and so on. So the secret is that each one of them will have that one thing. And that's what's delivered by the words, not replacing the words, but that ultimately is what I need to feel. So I don't know what the visual equivalent of that is, but that is where you bring in that expert photographer or whoever, and you tell them that, right? And you see what they give you, and they show you visual references, and they show you things that already exist, like this, like this, like this, and you say, like this, but black and white, like this, but higher, like this, but lower, and eventually you get into something, but you lead with the vision, you lead with the emotion, not with information. Because the alternative for that is, I run an event company. Well, there's a million, right? So what makes you different? What you said makes you different. So now express it everywhere. I think it's great. Any questions from online? Anything came up? Wow, they're like out. Last question before we get kicked out? Okay, well, listen, thank you so much for coming. I hope this was interesting.